Good evening and welcome to the NewsHour Agenda. I'm Madhavdas GK. After promising to speed up the disengagement process at the LAC during a meeting with Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, China has once again sought to provoke India. Beijing has released a new official map claiming Arunachal Pradesh and Aksai Chin as its territory. This comes months after India rejected attempts by China to rename 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh in the month of April. India reacted strongly to China's map provocation, with the Ministry of External Affairs informing that India has lodged a strong protest through diplomatic channels, adding that China's claims have no basis. The official statement also has said that such steps will only complicate the resolution of the boundary question. Even as the Modi government has sent out a strong message to the Chinese government, the opposition has questioned the centre's response, calling it meek and demanding more firm approach in dealing with China. But the question is, why this sudden provocation days after signs of possible attempts at resolving the LAC standoff? Is this an attempt to sully the G20 meeting that's being planned in New Delhi, where world leaders will converge? In fact, we'll be discussing all that, but first take a look at how the Congress and the BJP face-off played out earlier today.
Anyone can put out what they want. The fact of the matter is, India knows its territory. Prime Minister Modi's government is clear and has reposed our full faith in our armed forces to defend our territory, which they do so. And India, every part of it that is part of India, the Parliament has also said so, any inch that is with another country has to come back to India.
Well, I think this is mischief. In fact, a very, very serious mischief that China has been doing for a very, very long time. And it's also unfortunate that the G20 is coming up. Maybe it's an effort on part of China to try and disrupt what's happening in G20, but this is to be condemned.
This is not the first time that China is doing this. Anti-India movements. The entire world knows, what India is and what India's, borders are. What India is, it will remain. Arunachal Pradesh is with India and will be there with India.
Jawaharlal Nehru had the courage to reject the Chinese claim line of 1959. We may have gone into the war, we may have lost the war, but we fought. We did not just accept that line. We haven't still accepted. But now the government of India is, without fighting, without going to a war, is meekly accepting the Chinese claim line of 1959.
But fact is, we all know that China keep doing it, and it doesn't matter on ground. On ground, fact is that Arunachal is very much part of the country since independence, and even Arunachalis say that they are part of the country, only India.
अभी ब्रिक्स में गए थे, तो चाइना के प्रीमियर को मिलकर आए हैं, गले लगाए हैं हमेशा की तरह, और उसके बाद इस चाइना का मैप आता है, हमारी जमीन चाइना ने खा ली है। ये राहुल गांधी की बात सच है, हमको भी मालूम है। अरुणाचल में चाइना घुसने की कोशिश करते हैं, करो सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक हिम्मत आए तो चाइना पर।
You're watching the News Hour at 10, debate number 1 on Times Now, Super Prime Time.
Joining us for more on the issue, we have with us Brahma Chalani, Strategic Affairs Expert, Major General G.D. Bakshi, Defence Expert is with us, Colonel Denny, retired Defence Expert, also joining us. Also with us on the panel is Advocate Nikhil Jain, Political Analyst. Ghanshyam Tiwari also joins us. He's National Spokesman of the Samajwadi Party. Let me come across to you first, Brahma Chalani. We've seen the response coming in from the government of India. The opposition is questioning whether we should have had a more firm response to China. But, we all know perhaps the timing of this ahead of G20 is nothing but mind games. Is that the correct way to look at it?
You are absolutely right. It's clearly a provocation. Despite the Modi-Xi Jinping meeting in Johannesburg, despite Xi Jinping's upcoming visit to New Delhi for the G20 summit, China is engaged in constant provocations against India. India shouldn't be zealous in wanting to host Xi Jinping for the G20 summit. In fact, if he doesn't come, it'll play out better for India internationally. It will drive home the point internationally that Xi Jinping did not come to New Delhi for the G20 summit because of China's ongoing border aggression against India. So there's no need for India to be eager to host Xi Jinping. But I think it's also important to keep in mind the broader context in which this cartographic aggression, as represented by this new map, has taken place, China officially pursues what it calls three warfares doctrine. These three warfares blur the line between war and peace. In other words, in the Chinese Communist Party's thinking and doctrine, there is no real peace, because what we call peacetime is an occasion for the CCP to wage what it calls a smokeless war. The three warfares doctrine, according to the CCP itself, is a smokeless war. And cartographic aggression is representative of this smokeless war.
Right. Right, absolutely. And in fact, cartographic aggression over there, Nikhil Jain, that's a question that is in fact being raised over here by Brahma Chalani. But, earlier today we've seen spokespersons and members of parliament of the Congress come out. For instance, Manish Tiwari saying that there should be a candid admission. Now, what is this candid admission that the Congress is demanding? About the stalled talks, about the territorial ambitions of China, about how China, said one thing in Johannesburg and did exactly another thing with the release of this particular map. What exactly is this candid admission that the opposition is demanding? Nikhil Jain.
See, Madhav, there have been a number of transgressions from the Chinese, whether it is... am I audible?
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Am I audible? I'm saying there are a number of transgressions that the Chinese have engaged in, whether it is border incursions, whether it is these cartographic incursions, and the government of India is not willing to admit to the people of the country that this is what China is doing. They're not willing to take any strong action. China is setting up villages in the territory of Arunachal. All of us are worried when Dr. Jaishankar says that Arunachal is a part of India.
Let me begin to stop you there for just 10 seconds. Did you see the Minister of External Affairs statement today?
Doing about it?
Did you see, you're saying the government is not responding, but the Ministry of External Affairs has put out a statement. So let me just factually put things on place for the viewers. There was a statement with the Ministry of External Affairs. What's the problem with that statement?
I am saying that he did, and everybody is agreeing with the statement. Madhav, everybody is agreeing with the statement, but the problem is, what are we doing with the Chinese? Have we sent out a strong message to the Chinese that all of this nonsense that they're engaging in, it's not going to fly? And honestly, I think China is sending a very strong message to the world that they know that their president is going to attend the G20 summit in India in less than 2 weeks' time. And even in such an important occasion, before such an important occasion, China has the audacity to come out with a map like this that shows how the Chinese are treating the Indian government. There is absolutely no fear of the Indian government, no respect, no lines of diplomacy that the Chinese are following, and obviously the blame lies on the Indian government as well, that our actions towards the Chinese have been very weak. When the Chinese enter into our territory, martyr our soldiers, grab hold of our territory, and the Indian Prime Minister goes out and says, "Koi na aaya hai, na aayega, na kuch hua hai, na kuch hoga." Obviously, the Chinese get the message that we can do anything, but this Prime Minister, for his own domestic political gains, is going to pretend that nothing happened. So let's keep on doing more and more.
But is that factually borne out, sir?
Dr. Jaishankar raised it publicly and issued a statement that this is not done. But the point is, how did
India's concerns not highlighted in Johannesburg, according to Nikhil Jain?
Have the audacity to even do this in the first place?
In Johannesburg, when that meeting took place, when the bilateral took place, were India's concerns not highlighted? You're saying India's done nothing.
From the Indian government against the Chinese? I'm not saying the Indian government has not done anything. What I'm saying is that the Indian government is doing mighty little, very, very little.
Okay. What Indian government is doing very little. Let me take that question. Okay. Is that a fair assessment? Major General G.D. Bakshi, is that a fair assessment? That the Indian government is doing very little. The opposition says there should be a more firm stance when it comes to China. Why not taking a more aggressive stance when it comes to China and Chinese expansionism on the Indian LAC? General Bakshi.
Look, let me be blunt. The present Indian government is doing far more than the previous dispensations were doing. Right? We have taken up the building of infrastructure in audio. The Indian government has taken up the building of infrastructure in a very major way. When the Chinese tried to take advantage of the COVID pandemic and surprised us in Ladakh in 2020, that is the time when the Indians gave a very robust response. We mirror imaged the Chinese deployments, man for man, gun for gun, tank for tank, and then we sent in our strike corps there, right? We, in the Galwan, that hand-to-hand scuffle, that hand-to-hand fight, we got the better of the Chinese. The casualties, analyzed by the CIA were 34. The Russians said 40. The Chinese social media said 100. China, of course, lied and put it at 5, right? But the fact of the matter is, we then did a counter maneuver and we captured the Ladakh, the Kailash range. We secured the Ladakh range and we were overlooking the Chinese divisional headquarters, causing them to sweat, right? Is this enough? No. What we need to do is what we did in 1967. What we need to do is throw that peace and tranquility accord into the waste paper basket. In 1967, General Sagat Singh was the commander in Sikkim when the clash took place at Nathula. At that time also these kushti boxing matches were going on. The first order that he gave was, if I find anybody getting into taekwondo, karate or kushti with the Chinese, I'll court-martial that fellow. You have been issued weapons by the government of India, use them. Drop the Chinese, kill them. That is what the weapons are meant for. And when the clash went up, it escalated. We used medium artillery, about 750 Chinese casualties. We had peace for 30 years. I think you will have to show your teeth.
Okay.
Otherwise, this kind of a kathakali will keep going on.
Dr. Fuad
because China, it can't be low cost, no cost.
Okay. Let Dr. Fuad Alim come in on that. Dr. Fuad Alim, in fact, Major General G.D. Bakshi is saying that it needs a repeat of 67. This peace and tranquility accord has outlived its purpose. There has to be a strong message sent to China in terms of India showing its teeth. And that's the only thing that's going to work on ground. That's his argument. Please respond to him.
Well, I see. It seems that General G.D. Bakshi is very satisfied with the performance of the government of India and he is applauding it. And I think so there should be no reason for us to have any concern on the Chinese border if the Indian forces and under the leadership of Narendra Modi is doing a good job. But unfortunately, we are having this debate today. And the reason why we are having this debate is because China has published a particular map. And what has the Indian government responded with? And more importantly, who has responded? We had the Prime Minister speaking with the #1 man of China just a few days ago. And one has to understand, despite G.D. Bakshi's description of what happened in Galwan, he's spoken about what the Americans have published, what the Chinese have published, but he is not in a position to actually put on your TV show today what the government of India has put on the table for the people of India. As the CPM, as I said earlier in one of your programs, had requested after the 15th of June 2020, when the Galwan incident took place, that the government of India should come across with an authoritative paper as to what's happened in Galwan. We are in 2023 and it's almost 3 years down the line. Nobody in India, no citizen of India knows as to how and why 20 of our Jawans lost their lives, including an army officer. Okay. Now in February, I think so, 2023, these are the words of our foreign minister. I quote for you.
Yeah.
Look, China, are the bigger economy. What am I going to do? As a smaller economy, I am going to pick up a fight with the bigger economy. It is not a question of being reactionary. It is a question of common sense. Now, this is the strength and courage of our foreign minister, who gives a statement earlier this year on the question as to how to engage with China, starting off from a position of weakness. Now, these are the people who are running the country, and it's very clear that the
point. Colonel Denny, please come in on that point. He says that have we, in a way, by making this kind of a statement publicly, ceded some kind of space to China? That's a question that's coming in. And also, I want to add to that. 19 rounds of military talks have happened. Still, there's been no big breakthrough as far as the border issue is concerned, as far as the LAC is concerned. So what are we looking at over here, Colonel Denny? And what's the possible breakthrough?
Madhav, see, the fact that 19 rounds of talks have happened is something that that means that both sides are negotiating in a hard manner. So that means India is also negotiating in a hard manner. Now, there were 7 friction points which were there. 5 of those friction points we have resolved. That means the disengagement has taken place. The troops have not moved back to the barracks, but they are not there in eyeball-to-eyeball contact as we speak. But in two areas, that is Demchok and Depsang, the disengagement has not taken place, and that is because we are negotiating in a manner which is we want to ensure that there is no such thing like what they used to do in 2013 or before. They used to come there and do all this. So this particular incident, what has happened in May 2020, we are taking that as a case so that there has to be permanent peace there. What happened, like what General Bakshi was mentioning, that the earlier peace and tranquility agreement has broken down. So unless you have a clear-cut agreement, there will again be cases wherein this, without even the troops realizing, they can get into clashes. So that is what is happening now. That is what the negotiations are on. And let me also tell that those 5 places where the disengagement has taken place, the way the negotiations has taken place, what I know is that there has been a substantial kind of leeway which the Chinese have actually made. And I speak from my experience of, let me just give one example in North Bank. The North Bank area where the Chinese used to come till patrolling till finger 4. We used to go walking up till finger 8. Now there is a buffer zone which is kept between finger 4 and finger 8. Nobody is coming in that area. So a place where we never had any vehicle access and the Chinese had vehicle access, that area, the Chinese are not coming. So let's not have this kind of perception being built that India is on the back foot as far as these, wherever disengagement has taken place. India is on the back foot wherever these aggressions are taken. No matter which government comes, the Indian army will do what it has to do. So there is no question. Tomorrow another government will come. Still, I will say the same thing. It is nothing like the Indian army will not change. They will do, because it is a mandate for them. There is nothing else. There is the government changes and suddenly the colors of the Indian army change. Nothing like that happens on ground. So therefore, what I want to say, and what I completely endorse what General Bakshi has said, that things have been, there's a lot of changes that happen place. There is infrastructure development which is happening along the border. Those things have seen on ground.
Let me get in Ghanshyam Tiwari on that point. Ghanshyam Tiwari, today we have seen, spokespersons of the Congress party. I mean, of course, you are representing the Samajwadi Party, but Pawan Khera says that the government of India is quote-unquote meekly accepting the line. But if you go by what Colonel Dini says, there's been a lot of development. There have been, of course, it's a very slow-paced development, but the fact is that of the 7 friction points, 5 have been resolved. That is progress, many would say. Ghanshyam.
Good evening, Madhav, to you, the fellow co-panelists and the viewers. I read to you the headline in Times of India from 15th August. Restore our petrol rights, India to China. This is after the 19th round of talks. And in the backdrop is the soft, friendly policy of Modi government towards Xi Jinping and China, which began with Mr. Modi as Chief Minister, which continued as Mr. Gadkari as BJP president of BJP, when he said there should be party-to-party dialogue, and China said that in UPA 2 era that they wanted to create a relationship with the BJP government, and the BJP president saying we want to create a relationship with the Chinese Communist Party. It continued to the point where the Prime Minister has met Xi Jinping 20 times. They have swung on the same chula. They have said that we have a 1+ relationship. India gives $100 billion of trade in a year to China, more than any past government. And in the backdrop of what Colonel Dini is saying, that the governments can come and go, but the army is strongly there, then where does the Lal Aankh policy of Mr. Modi comes? The problem is the double speak of the Prime Minister. It is a double speak of the Prime Minister that weakens India's stand, that on one end you want to hug the Chinese and show your statesmanship. On the other hand, pictures are emerging that you were standing while the Chinese president was sitting, which in some way shows the weakness of the Indian Prime Minister and his claim. So it is a double speak of Mr. Modi with respect to let's
be clear. I mean, there are camera angles, there are movements that capture candid movements. I don't think that's a fair criticism of the strength of the Indian foreign policy. Yes, opposition leaders have cited it. There's no two ways about it. A lot of opposition leaders are citing it as some kind of surrender. But yes, let's be fair. We don't know the exact circumstances.
Yeah, we have seen this government. We have seen this government use repeated camera angles to project Mr. Modi as statesman just because Mr. Biden's head will move in one direction and Xi Jinping's head will move. The sword will cut both ways. But coming to the substantial point, it is the Prime Minister's doublespeak with respect to the intrusion on China. It is the martyrdom of our brave soldiers. It is the continuous denial by China about its aggression, and then this map issue, which is adding salt to the injury.
Let me come back to the map issue, and I want to bring in Brahmachalani on this. Now, there are virtually all the opposition panelists, Brahmachalani, are accusing the government of a soft approach. Let me come in and ask you one question. If there are these maps being released by China, which show Aksai Chin, which show Arunachal as part of their territory, what prevents us from putting out maps that call occupied Tibet, for instance, for Tibet, or some similar terminology to other parts of China? What prevents that reciprocity?
That's a very good question. The reason why the Chinese government continues to engage in provocations against India is because they can have their cake and eat it too. For example, for the last more than 3 years, they engage in border aggression against India. Yet in the same period, they are increasing their trade surplus phenomenally with India. Last year, the trade surplus of China with India went up by more than 50% to cross $100 billion. Now, if you can have your cake and eat it too, why wouldn't you pursue with this aggressive strategy against India? India does not pay back in kind. In fact, even though India's military response has been quite robust, for example, India has more than matched China's force deployments. Yet, India refuses to understand that only a comprehensive approach can deter China, which means you have to also use your economic and diplomatic levers. We have imposed no diplomatic costs on China, no economic costs on China. In fact, we are allowing China to reap rewards by continuing to boost its trade surplus with India. This strategy needs to change. But I must say that this is not an issue about domestic politics in India. The reason why we're having this border crisis with China for more than 3 years is because of a very serious lapse by the Indian armed forces. The Indian armed forces were caught by surprise by the Chinese deep encroachments. Reference has been made to 5 of the 7 so-called friction points being resolved. I'm sorry, nothing has been resolved. First, we are using euphemisms that actually camouflage what actually has happened. Friction points is a term to camouflage the fact that these are encroachment zones. This is where the Chinese have intruded and occupied Indian areas that we are dismissing as friction points.
Okay.
Second, more importantly, these so-called buffer zones have largely come up on Indian territory. Whether it's Galwan Valley, Hot Springs, Gogra, you see where these buffer zones have been created, largely on Indian territory. These buffer zones are temporary in nature.
Okay.
Until the two sides reach a deal to sequentially disengage, de-escalate, and de-induct forces. So Devsang and Demchuk are not the only outstanding issues.
Right.
The entire border of Eastern Ladakh with Tibet.
Let me bring in General Bakshi. Let me bring in Major General Bakshi. You mentioned the role of the army being, and several other aspects, including our diplomatic and trade areas, which are larger areas of concern, which allow China to behave in a responsible manner. General Bakshi, would you like to respond to what Mr. Brahmachalani just said?
I would like to point out again, in purely military terms, the response has been robust. We were caught by surprise, no doubt. The response has been robust, but we tend to lose on the negotiating table whatever gains we have made on the battlefield. We had done a counter maneuver and occupied the Kailash range. What was the tearing hurry to vacate the Kailash range? Right? I am now telling you what was the reason to play by the Chinese playbook. if they wanted us to go by the peace and tranquility accord after they had used baseball bats with iron nails and, barbed wire and which were lethal weapons, which caused about 20 casualties this side, why did we stick to no use of weapons? I mean, why must we play by the Chinese playbook? For God's sake, we need to get out of the logjam. We have a precedent. We did that in 67. That was the kind of response which will give China a check. Otherwise, this will go on. Now, let me point out one very serious issue. Look, there are battle indications that China is preponing the timeline for attack on Taiwan. When Xi Jinping asked for an official meeting with Modi in Johannesburg, it was because he wants to, calm down this frontier while he deals with Taiwan. They were initially talking of 2027 timeline, then they brought it to 25. Now there is talk it could be April, May, August, the 3 Met windows, even next year. Right? So then quite obviously he'd like to sweet talk you. Quite obviously we were firm about it. But let me go a step further. In pure military, tactical, operational terms, when China is busy with Taiwan, that should be our strategic window of opportunity to take back Aksai Chin. Don't forget that in 1962, when, the world was busy with the Cuban Missile Crisis between US and Soviet Union, China attacked us.
Right.
Took that window of opportunity. Let's pay it back in the same coin.
Absolutely. And
why should we go by the Chinese playbook and let China deal with one adversary at a time? Deal with Taiwan, then switch to us, then go to Japan.
Well, certainly. There's no doubt about it. China is, of course, its expansions of multiple fronts, whether it's Taiwan, whether it's South China Sea, where several countries are opposing the Chinese position over there, or with India. This is problematic on multiple levels. But Nikhil Jain, I think this is a question that you should answer. Because at the end of the day, the counter-argument to whatever your criticism of the government of the day today is that they will always turn around and say that nothing compares to the amount of land that was ceded in 62. There can be perhaps no precedent and there's no comparison to what actually happened then and what's happening now. Nikhil.
And Madhav, what happened in 1962 was a war that India fought and India lost, and the Prime Minister at the time wasn't shying away from the people of India from telling that we have a problem, that Chinese have gone onto our lands,
There were no strategic blunders in 62.
I'm not all saying that. There were strategic blunders, there were inefficiencies of the government, but that's the point, Madhav.
Yeah.
We are sitting in 2023 now. Are we to discuss about what happened wrong 51 years ago, or should we talk about 2023? Should we talk about this Pradhan Mantri Adarsh Gram Yojana? Look at this entire village that China has made in what was earlier no buffer zone, and the government of India or the Indian Foreign Ministry has not issued a single statement on that. And look at your show right now, Madhav. I'm sure your guest team has tried to contact the BJP to try to get the spokespersons on the show. I don't see a single spokesperson. 6 panelists we have today, not a single spokesperson. Those same spokespersons will come and discuss the statement of a single irrelevant Congress leader. They are not here to answer on questions of such importance, and that is the strategy of the Indian government, that when it comes to incursions and violence by China on the Indian troops, on Indian land, on India's sovereignty, the BJP likes to turn a blind eye to all of it. The Prime Minister likes to play on swings with the President of China and never actually raise the lal aankh he's been talking about.
If you looked a little harder,
the same man in
if you looked a little harder, you would also see that there is no Congress spokesperson on the panel. So let's not even get into that debate. But the questions that you have raised, I will nevertheless get on to Colonel Denny. Colonel Denny, several questions being raised as to the role as far as our own army is concerned. Because Mr. Brahmachalani referred to several aspects of those flashpoints that you particularly mentioned, and also at the same time, here you have an argument coming in from Nikhil Jain that why are we looking back in history? We have to talk about only the current day today. Let's not talk about what's happened in the past. How do you respond to that, Colonel Denny?
I do agree partially to what Advocate Nikhil has said, that we need not look back constantly to what has happened in the past. And that is where I would like to assure Advocate Nikhil that things have changed from the past. And as a person who has served there, and what has been, what one has heard from our veterans, including I think Mr. Ghanshyam's father also was from the Air Force. The earlier time people used to say, and the situation here today, that there has been a sea change. There has been the sea change in the infrastructure which is there. There has been a sea change in the way we look at the Chinese. The mindset of Indian troops have changed. The way we deal with the troops, with the Chinese have changed. And let me assure you that most of the time the Indian stories do not come out. Whatever we do not come out because of our own official secrets acts and such like things. But let me assure you that whatever China does, it is given in kind in 2023, 2020, 2021, 2022, whatever the timeline is. It is not 1962 anymore. So that way, I'm very sure that whatever is happening on the line of actual control on the ground, there is no reason for worry. Like Mr. Brahmacharya also mentioned that there are certain things. I don't agree to that because there is a difference between sitting somewhere and making an analysis and being there on ground and seeing the response. And many of the issues which come down today is because of the Indian response. I would like to underline the Indian response.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on this debate. Brahmacharya, Major G.D. Bakshi, Colonel D.D., Captain Dr. Fuad Halim, Advocate Nikhil Jain, Ghanshyam Tiwari stays with us for debate number 2. Thanks so much for joining us.